A CEO stands before her company, declaring,
Integrity is our bedrock.
then, moments later, behind closed doors, she green-lights a cost-cutting measure that skirts safety regulations, or a sales manager preaches honesty, but everyone sees him inflate numbers to hit targets. Which message truly shapes the organization? Not the speech, never the speech. It's the silent, undeniable performance happening right there, every single day.
And that's the core question we're grappling with today, Daniel. Welcome everyone to Part 2 of Unit 8 of BUS 3306, Business and Society. In Part 1, we laid the groundwork for business ethics, understanding it's far more than just legal compliance, and how trust underpins long-term performance. Now we dive deeper into a critical, almost foundational question for any organization. Who teaches employees what's acceptable? What are the real shapers of ethical behavior within a company?
It's a deceptively simple question, Lily, because if you ask most people, they'd immediately point to the usual suspects: the employee handbook, those thick policy documents, maybe annual compliance training. And those things are certainly important. They have their place. But our readings this week, and frankly, decades of organizational behavior research, point to something far more fundamental, far more impactful than any written rule. And that is quite simply leadership. It boils down to actions, not words.
Absolutely. It's about what leaders do, not just what they say. The lecture provides a really clear illustration of this with the two different managers. Manager A is constantly giving speeches about honesty and integrity, ethical accountability, all the right buzzwords. But when the pressure's on, when targets are tough, that same manager quietly manipulates sales figures. Suddenly, the department looks better. It's a quick fix, an easy win.
And then you have Manager B. No grand speeches, no weekly sermons on ethics, but every single decision Manager B makes, every interaction, demonstrates honesty. Mistakes are owned. Responsibility is taken. Employees are treated fairly. Feedback is genuinely welcomed. And critically, everyone, from the most junior to the most senior, is held to the same standards. It's a consistent, observable pattern of behavior.
Precisely. And if you ask anyone which manager is more likely to build an ethical team, the answer is almost universally Manager B. Why? Because employees are watching. They're not just listening to the rhetoric, they're observing the lived reality. They learn more from behavior than from speeches. Leadership isn't just a position, it's a constant performance. And that performance, that modeling of behavior, sets the actual standard for organizational culture. The Padmavathi et al. 2025 study highlights this, emphasizing that ethical leadership is built on consistently demonstrated values like honesty, fairness, transparency, accountability, and respect. It's about making ethical behavior the normal, expected way of doing business, not just something confined to a policy document that collects dust.
It's that old saying.
Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly, and it applies perfectly here. Leaders often underestimate how closely they are observed. If a manager cuts corners, employees notice. If executives get special treatment while everyone else follows the rules, employees notice. If promotions are based more on who you know than what you do, employees definitely notice. And these observed behaviors, these signals, gradually coalesce into what we call organizational culture.
It becomes how things are normally done around here. That's such a powerful yet simple definition, Lily. It really is. Think about any workplace you've been in. You don't need to read the employee handbook to understand the unspoken rules. You quickly learn, can people openly disagree with their manager without fear of reprisal? Is teamwork genuinely rewarded, or is it every person for themselves? Are mistakes seen as learning opportunities, or are they grounds for punishment? Do people feel comfortable reporting problems, or do they keep quiet? Can you ask a difficult question without it being seen as a challenge? The answers to those questions define the culture, not some mission statement on a poster.
And it's crucial to remember that culture isn't created by those posters. It's forged in the daily interactions, the everyday decisions, and especially what gets rewarded. If leaders reward honesty, then honesty thrives. If shortcuts get you ahead, then shortcuts become common practice. If collaboration is truly valued, then teamwork grows organically. So culture always reflects what leadership consistently encourages, whether explicitly or implicitly.
This is why ethical leadership isn't just a nice to have, it's fundamental. Ethical leaders create an environment where employees genuinely understand that doing the right thing isn't just an ideal, it's the expected thing. It's integrated into the operational DNA. This brings us back to our central point. The most potent teacher of ethics in an organization isn't a document, it's the leader themselves.
So, to zoom out for a moment, what we're really saying is that ethical culture isn't legislated, it's cultivated through the daily performance of its leaders. Their actions are the curriculum, and the employees are constantly learning.
Exactly. And we see this played out in the sales department example from the lecture. Imagine a salesperson facing aggressive monthly targets. They discover that a slight exaggeration of product benefits could easily close more deals. The company makes more money. The salesperson gets a bonus. On the surface, everyone seems to win. Now, what happens next is entirely dependent on leadership.
This is where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? If the manager notices this behavior, sees the uptick in sales, and chooses to ignore the ethical lapse, what message does that send? It's a very clear, very loud message. Results matter more than ethics, and it won't be long before other employees observe this and start doing the same. It normalizes unethical behavior, and eventually that erodes customer trust. Complaints rise, the company's reputation suffers. Short-term gain for long-term pain.
Precisely. But now consider a different response. The manager identifies the misleading claims. Instead of praising the increased sales, they explain why such tactics are unacceptable, even if it means missing a target or two in the short run. The employee receives coaching, not a bonus. The immediate sales numbers might take a hit, which can be a tough pill to swallow for some managers.
And this is where the tension often lies for leaders. Do you prioritize the immediate quantifiable results, those sales figures, quarterly earnings, or do you uphold the intangible long-term asset of your company's reputation and customer trust? It's easy to say the latter, but when your bonus is tied to those short-term numbers, it's a genuine test of ethical leadership.
It is, Daniel, but the ethical leader understands that customer trust, reputation, and a strong internal culture are far more valuable in the long run. They know that short-term ethical compromises lead to long-term liabilities. That manager's response, upholding the ethical standard, ensures that customers continue to trust the organization. It's ethical leadership in practice, balancing immediate pressures with enduring values.
The lecture also makes another really important point. Ethical leaders don't magically eliminate mistakes. People are fallible, mistakes are inevitable, but what ethical leaders do is create an environment where those mistakes can be reported honestly and addressed quickly before they fester and become colossal problems. We've seen this play out in countless corporate scandals.
Absolutely. Many investigations into major corporate failures reveal a common thread. Someone inside the organization usually saw the warning signs, sometimes long before the public or even senior management became aware. The real problem wasn't the initial mistake, but the culture of silence. Employees were afraid to speak up. Perhaps they feared losing their jobs, or believed their concerns would be ignored, or even worse, that they'd be punished for being a whistleblower.
This points to a fundamental aspect of a healthy organizational culture, psychological safety. It's about creating an environment where employees feel secure enough to ask challenging questions without fear. Questions like,
Is this decision ethical? Are we following company policy? Could this harm customers? Should we report this issue?
when those questions can be asked openly, that's when an organization becomes truly resilient. It's a self-correcting mechanism. When the fear of speaking up outweighs the fear of inaction, that's when small problems snowball into public relations disasters, or worse, ethical catastrophes.
And this directly relates to what we discussed earlier about leadership behavior. If leaders consistently listen to feedback, acknowledge potential issues, and act on concerns, they reinforce the idea that speaking up is valued, not penalized. Conversely, if leaders shut down dissent or punish those who bring bad news, they actively cultivate that culture of silence.
So, to tie this segment together, ethical leadership isn't about creating a perfect, mistake-free environment. It's about building a robust, honest one where mistakes are seen as opportunities for learning and correction, rather than something to be hidden. It's about ensuring that the path to resolution is always clearer than the path to cover-up.
Another crucial characteristic of ethical leadership is consistency. It's easy to say
Rules apply to everyone.
But what happens when a manager disciplines a junior employee for being late, then ignores the same behavior from a senior colleague? Employees notice that. They see the double standard, and once people perceive that rules are applied differently based on someone's position or influence, trust starts to evaporate. It breeds cynicism and resentment, undermining the very fabric of ethical culture.
It certainly does. This inconsistency sends a message that the stated values are conditional, that power or status can circumvent the rules. Ethical leaders, however, understand that credibility is built on an unwavering commitment to applying standards consistently across the entire organization. Everyone, regardless of their job title or their relationship with the leadership, is held accountable to the same set of expectations.
And this consistency isn't just about punishment or discipline, it's about rewards too. If certain individuals are consistently given preferential treatment in terms of assignments, promotions, or recognition, even if they aren't necessarily the most deserving, that also erodes trust and signals a biased system. Ethical leadership applies fairness in all aspects.
It strengthens credibility immensely. When employees see that the rules are truly universal, that there aren't insiders and outsiders when it comes to accountability, it reinforces their belief in the organization's integrity. It demonstrates that the leadership's commitment to ethical principles is genuine, not just situational. This creates a sense of stability and fairness that is invaluable.
This also connects to the idea of transparency, which the readings discuss. Transparency isn't about revealing every single confidential detail of the business. It's about communicating honestly about decisions, challenges, and expectations, and avoiding deception. Employees are often more resilient than leaders give them credit for. They can handle difficult news.
What they can't handle, or rather, what genuinely frustrates them, is feeling like they're being misled or kept in the dark. If a difficult decision is made, employees are far more likely to accept it, even if they don't like it, if the reasons are explained openly and honestly. The frustration often stems not from the decision itself, but from the perceived lack of candor or the sense of being deliberately excluded from critical information.
Exactly. Transparency helps prevent that frustration, that sense of being disrespected. And another quality that goes hand in hand with this is humility. Sometimes leaders mistakenly believe that admitting mistakes will weaken their authority. They feel they have to project an image of infallibility, but in reality, the opposite often occurs.
Leaders who are willing to acknowledge their own mistakes, who can say,
I got that wrong, or I could have handled that better,
often earn far greater respect. Employees see authenticity, not just a flawless facade. Nobody expects a leader to know everything or be perfect all the time. What they do expect and deeply value is honesty and the willingness to learn from missteps.
This is a critical point, Daniel. If leaders demonstrate humility, it encourages others to do the same. It normalizes the idea that mistakes are part of the process and that growth comes from acknowledging and learning from them, rather than attempting to hide them. It fosters a culture of continuous improvement rather than a culture of blame.
And this all connects directly with the EMAR property study mentioned in our readings by Al-Armoti et al. 2022. They found a clear link. Ethical behavior actually improves employee productivity. People perform better when they trust their leadership and believe that organizational decisions are fair.
That finding makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Think about your own experiences. Would you feel motivated to go above and beyond, to invest your discretionary effort for a leader or an organization you fundamentally don't trust? Probably not. When trust is absent, motivation plummets, and when motivation is low, performance inevitably suffers. It's a clear chain reaction. Trust influences motivation, motivation influences performance, and performance ultimately influences organizational success.
It's a powerful feedback loop. High trust leads to high motivation, which boosts performance, ultimately reinforcing the positive culture. Conversely, low trust leads to low motivation, poor performance, and a downward spiral. It underscores the idea that ethical leadership isn't just about doing the right thing morally. It's also a highly practical, strategic imperative for business success.
So if we look back at what we've discussed, the modeling of behavior over speeches, the cultivation of culture, handling mistakes with openness, the power of consistency, transparency, and humility, It all points to leadership being the primary engine of an ethical organization.
Absolutely, Lily. And it brings us to a compelling final question for listeners to consider. Imagine you're promoted to manager next month. On your very first day, what would your team learn about your ethical standards just by watching how you behave? Not by listening to your introductory speech, not by looking at your PowerPoint presentation, and certainly not by reading any policy document you might share, but purely through your actions, your reactions, your decisions. Because whether we realize it or not, leaders are teaching every single day, often without saying a single word.
That's a profound thought, Daniel. It shifts the focus from what should I say to what am I actually doing, and what does that communicate? It's a constant, silent curriculum being delivered by every leader at every level.
And that is where the real power of ethical leadership lies. It's in the quiet, consistent, observable behavior that truly shapes an organization's moral compass. It determines how things are normally done around here, and ultimately, whether the organization thrives on trust or stumbles on cynicism.
Indeed, as we've explored throughout this session, the impact of a leader's actions on culture, trust, and even productivity is undeniable. The two managers example, the sales target scenario, and the emphasis on transparency and humility all highlight this fundamental truth. Ethical leadership isn't a theory, it's a practice, lived out daily.
And those practices, as Padmavathi et al. Remind us, are rooted in consistently demonstrating core values like honesty and fairness. And as Al-Armodi et al. Showed, the practical result is a more productive and engaged workforce. It's about building an environment where people feel safe, respected, and motivated.
Which leads us perfectly into part 3, where we'll delve into the more practical tools organizations use to encourage ethical behavior, like codes of ethics, codes of conduct, and specific decision-making frameworks. These are the formal structures that complement the informal but powerful lessons taught by leadership behavior.
Thank you for joining us for Part 2 of Unit 8 of BUS 3306, Business and Society. We hope this discussion has offered a valuable perspective on the profound impact of leadership on organizational ethics. If you found this lecture helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving this video a like, and sharing it with anyone who might benefit. Friends, classmates, colleagues, or even your own managers and employees. Your support truly helps us continue creating free, high-quality content for everyone.
We appreciate you learning with us. Join us for Part 3 as we explore the tangible tools that support ethical decision-making in the workplace. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and have a wonderful day.